Come with me to a magical place where being labeled the pork queen is a compliment, where being nice is just a way of life, and where all leaders of the free world must pass through. Welcome to Iowa. Whether you're a current Iowan, an Iowa expat, or an Iowan at heart, this show is for you. This is the Iowa Podcast. Real Iowans, real talk, no drama. I'm Justin Brady, and today I'm joined by Clayton Mooney, the co-founder and chief farmer of Clayton Farms, formerly Nebulam. Clayton, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you, Justin.
I think the very obvious question here is, and we have a lot of questions, right? But basically, you have figured out a way to farm in the winter, in the dead of winter. But I think the obvious question here is, what is Nebulam? Let's start there.
Yes. So we've evolved over the past few years, but now what we're known for is actually being an indoor farm that serves fresh food directly to people's doorsteps year round.
Okay, got it. Indoor farm. And where were you based out of? Where'd you start?
We are based in the Iowa State University Research Park. That's where our HQ and our first Iowa farm is located.
Got it. So why, this is the big question, right? Is obviously indoor farming, you can grow stuff inside in the winter, but how and why? These are the big questions. Like, how does this technology work? How are you doing this? And then after that, I want to get into why this matters.
Yeah, great question. So I should preface with, we never planned to become the farm ourselves. So when Dane and Poole, who is our co-founder and chief engineer, and myself started Nebulam about 5 years ago, we set out originally to become what we considered the John Deere for indoor farming. So we saw indoor farming as a very antiquated industry. The growing equipment produced small amounts of food, and there was little to no software in the day-to-day operations. That combination meant an average indoor farm took 7 years to reach profitability, which we thought was way too long. So originally we set out to design and build our own growing equipment and the software that runs that equipment. And we figured we'd get into the hands of indoor farms and new and expanding indoor farmers, and we would be the B2B play. So we were proving out our technology at scale here in the research park at Iowa State University. And the model for us was to focus on getting people on site, seeing it, leaving and saying, yes, I want this in my location. By the time we got everything set up, that was February 2020. So the very next month rolls around, pandemic hits. We have 6 days before our next harvest of kind of just showing out our technology, knowing no one would be coming to tour. And that's when we pivoted to what we're known for today as the actual indoor farm ourselves.
Got it. And so you ended up going direct to consumer with goods rather than just using the farm as a demo, essentially.
Absolutely. And by luck, we had focused the first 3.5 years on the growing technology.
Right.
And we got really good at that. But when we pivoted to becoming the farm ourselves, going direct to consumer and actually selling the food, it forced us to build our own fulfillment technology stack. You put the two together and we realized, and we kind of stumbled in to owning the supply chain from seed through the moment we deliver fresh food on someone's doorstep just a few hours after harvest. That's all us today.
Got it. So there's a lot to unpack there, right? There's a ton. But I want to start with the technology. Like, I don't think most Iowans are familiar, maybe some are because we're an ag state, but I don't think most are familiar with the current, or I guess I should say the technology process before you invented a new process. Like, what was that process like, and why wasn't it working for indoor farmers?
Yes, so I have my thoughts on it. This is just one crazy guy's opinion, but I think vertical farming is kind of the hot topic, and people want to see robots seeding, transplanting, harvesting, packaging, and they want really large scale operations because most vertical farms still focus on a traditional business model. So they'll set up a 50 to 100,000 square foot facility. At the end of the day, they want a grocer or distributor to come and wholesale and buy all of their food produced off of them. And that's their model. Whereas when you look at the technology piece, it's often tens of millions to hundreds of millions to automate every which process. Whereas with Nebulam, we really focused on more of a modular setup and an Ikea approach because we've had to learn the
Oh,
hard way that fewer parts equal fewer problems.
right.
And we're okay with some of the processes being manual. So when I say indoor farm today, that means it covers a vertical farm, a greenhouse, and a hothouse. But how we're instantly different than most other indoor farms across Iowa is we start with growing hydroponically. So we use zero soil and we grow in a fully controlled environment. So we can control every which of the variables throughout the entire growing season.
Now, why not soil? Right. I think I understand this from a basic standpoint, but, we're Iowans and we're used to really great soil. And we know how that's vital for growing vegetables. So why not soil? Why don't we need that?
I like to think of it in terms of utilizing space. So if we can grow indoors and we can take advantage of cubic feet for production, that means we can use a lot smaller footprint to produce a lot more food. So one of our farms today averages about 20 times more production on a per square foot basis than if we were to grow outdoors and, of course, only have one growing plane.
Yeah. Okay. And that's because you can stack these things, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so obviously stacking them, you just have lighting set up in between these layers. How dense, don't you have to give them some space, obviously, but how dense are we talking here? Are these inches from each other? Do they expand over time? Do they stay the same depth away from each other? What does that look like?
Yeah, so it starts with what kind of foods you want to grow. So we specialize in leafy green, microgreen, and vine crop production. So as far as leafy greens go, so you can think your lettuces, your arugulas, kale, spinach. Thankfully, all of those have shorter requirements to grow to maturity and to harvest. So we're talking just about a half a foot between every growing level. And exactly what you mentioned. So everything's stacked where essentially it's our growing equipment, it's the plants, and then lights, and then rinse and repeat, growing equipment, plants, lights, over and over again.
Got it. Okay. So there obviously what I'm hearing is there is I don't know what the right word is for this, but there are some limitations right now for what you can and cannot grow. So what are you successfully growing indoors, and what are some areas that you can't grow indoors or you're struggling with?
So one of the most common questions we're asked is, can we grow corn using our equipment? So yes, we could, but it would be very, very expensively grown corn. So we focused on leafy greens because of the volume. More and more people every year are eating lettuce varieties, getting into kale, arugula, spinach, vine crops such as our cherry tomatoes. Having them as a fresh food, locally sourced year round is an absolute need, especially here in the Midwest. And then microgreens for us is, I think, an entirely untapped market, especially for the Midwest. So between those kind of three areas, we can grow 200 plus foods before we have to go back and change the design and the technology stack of our growing equipment.
Got it. So let's talk about corn briefly, and then we have dozens of questions. Would that even be sustainable, growing corn indoors because of its height?
No, you would spend a minimum of 20x producing that corn just because of the space requirements that it needs.
Yeah, I was going to say, because that stuff's super tall. For anybody who's walked in the cornfields, which a lot of us have, that stuff's super tall. You'd have to have obscenely high buildings and a lot of energy to do that. So
I'm having flashbacks from detasseling days. Yes.
Right. So you're running the nutrients, and you said hydroponically. So you're running the nutrients that your vegetables need through the water, and it's dripping over the roots, and the roots are absorbing all that, right?
Spot on.
So I'm assuming because this is indoors, I know that, USDA organic is technically a certification you have to apply for, but, for legal, blah, 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 or is this basically organic stuff?
So this is how I like to answer that question, because organic definition can vary.
Right.
So will we go after USDA certification? Yes. It doesn't make sense to go after and make that investment until we're at a larger scale. But when an average individual or average consumer asks us if we are organic, I can respond with, we grow in a fully controlled environment. We use no pesticides, and we use a base A and B fertilizer. So we're not adding any additional chemicals to try to change the flavor profile, the taste, anything like that. to our foods.
Right. So you basically have to say we're kind of organic, but not organic because we don't have the official seal. I think a lot of people don't know that, as Iowans probably do, but a lot of people throughout the nation might not know that organic is actually like you have to go through the USDA and get certified and, keep your grain separated and do all these, you have to check all these boxes.
Absolutely. And for us being, a startup always under-resourced, we want to wait until we're at the proper scale to where we can make that investment, and then it's amplified across all of our farm locations.
What is that investment, if you don't mind me asking? Like, what does that take? I mean, you obviously have to invite some people from the USDA over, but like, is there a filing cost? What does that all look like?
So from our perspective, it's much more about just the time and the infrastructure.
Sure.
You're looking close to six figures, especially for the amount of foods that we want to be growing and the amount of locations. So if we only have a couple of locations right now, I think about dividing that cost among however many locations. So that's why we're waiting until we're at closer to a dozen locations before we move forward with that.
Got it. And I want to talk about your locations here in a second. But first, you did indicate this earlier, how the pandemic basically changed your business model. You're going to be the John Deere of indoor farming. You were going to provide the tech, but then you pivoted when the pandemic happened to basically being the farm itself. But so right now, I think when you were doing like demo or when you were kind of experimenting in the direct-to-consumer market, you were working with restaurants. And then, of course, the pandemic happened. How did that all change kind of your distribution model?
Yes. So when we had our model farm here in the research park, and we had our prototypes brought to commercial scale life from our manufacturing partners, at that moment, we said, well, let's subsidize some of our costs on a monthly basis because we want food growing and we want to get to harvest, but what are we going to do with all of this food? So we started wholesaling to local area grocers and restaurants, and we were growing a couple percent month over month with revenue. Nothing too exciting, but it was helping cover some of our costs. And then when the pandemic hits, essentially overnight, we lost all of that revenue. And we had 6 days before our next weekly harvest. And that's when we sat there and said, okay, we've lost all revenue overnight and we cannot get anyone on site for tours so they can actually see what we built and want to replicate it in their location. So let's try a direct consumer subscription model. I'm very keen on subscription models or recurring revenue models so you can better plot out your growth and your scale. And when we pivoted to that model, we gave ourselves essentially a couple weeks to pick up a dozen subscribers and about another month to pick up a couple other dozen subscribers. And thankfully, it just took off. We started growing 40% month over month.
Wow.
And we've essentially done that over the last 5 quarters. And what we realized the value of that was, out of necessity, we were forced to build another technology stack, as I mentioned, the fulfillment tech stack. And once we put those two together, we realized we own the supply chain. So by going direct to consumer and owning the supply chain, well, everything else seems chaotic around the world with supply chain. We could deliver the same healthy, consistent food to someone's doorstep week over week, 52 weeks a year. Because we went direct to consumer and had no middle person helping us with distribution, we captured all of the margins. So we have positive net margins on each delivery going out the door today.
Wow. And
then we could know our subscribers better than grocery stores know their customers because of all the data that was coming into us.
Interesting. So, I mean, it's too early to say probably, right? But the pandemic may very well have pivoted you to a more profitable business model?
100%. Way bigger market, way better. I mean, we love the vertical integration and the infrastructure play now. And that's what we've been able to study over these last 5 quarters to realize we can cookie cutter this and launch farms in hundreds of other locations across the U.S.
I think a lot of people don't fully understand the supply chain, right? Like there's a grower, whether it's a corporate or family grower, they hand it off to a distribution company, maybe a 3PL, they put it on a truck, they bring it to a grocer, the grocer resells it. By the time you get it, that produce, like if it's a tomato or something, has been handled 3 to 4 times, right? And so in your case, you grow it, you put it on a truck, you bring it right to someone's door, correct?
Correct. And one note on that, this is kind of the passion behind us owning the supply chain and why we've continued to make investments in owning the supply chain and being vertically integrated, is if you walk into a produce aisle right now in a grocery store and look at all the food, it's missing a third or more of its nutrients. And that's because it's older than 3 days post-harvest. And it's not the grocer's fault, and it's not the distributor's fault, and it's not the producer's fault, but because they are segmented, you cannot improve that process. So vertical integration and owning the supply chain is exactly the direction we need to go.
So, okay, I wasn't aware of that. So closer to consumer, the more local you, now maybe this doesn't universally apply, but basically the more local you can make some produce, the less the less distance it has to travel, the healthier it is?
Yes, so essentially...
I mean, that's a generalization. Obviously, there are exceptions to everything, but...
Yeah, and with it, essentially, being a living organism, harvested, removing the roots, so it's dying. And post-harvest, after 3 days, most produce is missing 30 to 40% of its nutritional content. So if you are even within a couple 100-mile distance and you are, let's say, growing lettuce, you drop it off at a distributor. That distributor turns around, has about a day from getting it from you to getting it to a grocer. The grocer gets it out onto the shelf, and this is best case scenario. The grocer gets it on the shelf the following day. By the time you buy it, get it home, put it in your fridge, the next day, there goes a third of its nutrients. Wow. So that same day harvest and delivery for us is absolutely key. So you can capture all of the nutritional benefit. Yeah,
and the climate angle is really interesting because, again, these supply chains that are trucking things all across the country, that contributes to a lot of emissions. So a lot of climate people are saying, hey, we need to, obviously the trucking's good and the distribution's good, but we need to figure out ways so that we're not running the same truck in the same route over this long distance, that we localize these things as much as possible. And just from a logistics company buddy I know of, a lot of truckers don't really want to be doing these huge weeks away from their families. They want to stay more local if at all possible and have more time at home, but that's not a possibility, which is why we're seeing this enormous trucker shortage. So you do start to see how getting a rein on these supply chains and localizing things a little bit more is better for the economy, but better for the individuals who work in those areas.
Absolutely. And us owning the last mile delivery portion too, by contracting out delivery team members, that's really key for us because that is one of the most important positions because you come face to face with our subscribers and our demographic is a little bit older. So if they have feedback, they like giving it face to face compared to reaching out via email. So if it's an actual farmer from the farm showing up for that delivery and it's not a third party, that improves the feedback loop. Therefore, it improves us iterating upon not only our foods, but our services that we provide to our subscribers as well.
So we're going to talk about regions. Well, let's just talk about that really quickly. Let's talk about it really quickly, but we're going to expand later into other regions. Currently, where are you at? What areas do you serve?
So we started by just serving the Ames area, and then we had requests in Ankeny and Des Moines. So now on every Wednesday, we're harvesting and delivering throughout the Ames area. Every Thursday, we're harvesting and delivering throughout the Ankeny and Des Moines areas. And we're currently piloting from our Ames farm, Eastern Iowa, every other Friday delivery to the Cedar Rapids and Iowa City areas. And if that continues to go well, that will be our next farm location here in the state. But as of August 1st, we actually launched our second farm. And with that came our consumer-facing rebrand. But we launched our second farm in Edina, Minnesota to serve all of the Minneapolis and St. Paul market. And our first harvest and deliveries are just around the corner in late September.
Wow. I actually lived near that area for a little while. I didn't know you were actually in Edina. We had spoken before, really? So I knew you were going to Minnesota. I didn't know it was Edina. That's interesting. My wife actually started her first business there called the Edina Music Academy. You can probably Google it somewhere and find a remnant somewhere. So what is I want to talk about the expansion plans here a little bit, but what is the feedback you are getting? Because that is cool when you get a delivery driver with your, produce that works for the company. What is the kind of feedback you are hearing?
Yeah, so it really comes down to our mission is to grow what people want. And on the surface, it's, okay, fine, that's a fluffy mission. Most companies want to, serve their customers. But behind the scenes, that's why I view as more of a data and consumer food company than just an indoor farming company. So by us owning the supply chain, having that face-to-face interactions, we are able to actually listen to our subscribers. And by the time we make their next delivery, make those adjustments.
Wow.
And that has led to essentially every food that we roll out, which is every 3 months right now, we introduce a new food. That's coming from direct requests from subscribers. we've seen our retention continue to scale. And today we only have a 4% churn rate, and that's year to date. So we're only losing 1 in every 25 subscribers to churn. So we very much understand that we have a premium food that they enjoy and appreciate. And we also have the premium subscriber success or customer service.
Got it. So how did you figure this out? Did you just buy a bunch of trucks and hire a bunch of drivers, or did that process look different? You know, how does that all work? Do you just harvest, you put it in a box, you throw it in a truck, you drive it around? How did that whole process work?
So when we pivoted to the direct consumer model and offered the subscription service, and we had to build out that fulfillment tech stack, that allowed us to capture subscriber information, optimize our routes. But one of the key focus points that I think, especially any technology startup should be aware of, is everyone within the company should understand and be able to do everybody else's job for the experience, kind of a day in the life. Yeah. So as an example, our production team members help with subscriber success. Our software engineers have done deliveries, but the harvest and deliveries really started with Dana and I of introducing ourselves. Hey, we're the co-founder. Thank you so much for supporting us. This truly kept the lights on for us. Yeah. And we appreciate it. And we're always listening. So if you have any and all feedback, good or bad, we want to hear it so we can fix it.
So it is year round, and you're able to grow this stuff year round. Does it become like more competitive with other growers? I don't know if we grow a ton of lettuce and like cherry tomatoes and stuff in Iowa outside of people's gardens. I don't know if we have huge operations for that, but do your prices, is it tougher to compete in the summer when like all the North American farms are like locally growing stuff and costs are coming down, or are you able to stay competitive year round?
So how I view competition, maybe it's naive, but we don't spend any effort on competition. I think for every moment we worry about it, or any moment we try to research another company and specifically look at where they're better than us or where they're worse than us, I think that's a moment we don't get to spend with our subscribers. Sure. And so that's a company-wide policy of we just do not spend any time on competition. But to your point, to seasonality, so for instance, when farmers markets pop up, people love to visit them. The energy levels are high. The fresh local food, of course, here in Iowa, that is mostly seasonal. And what we've realized is we want to continue to get our name and brand out there. So we started setting up at farmers markets. Oh, interesting. But because we don't operate on a marginal supply, so essentially anything that we start growing has already been pre-sold. That's allowed us just to get samples out and just tell more people about us, but then also show our subscribers that here's some faces that you can put to the company. But one side of the coin is as farmers markets wrap up or as CSAs run out of their leafy greens for the season, we have seen influxes of subscribers who say, okay, well, my lettuce CSA just ran out. I'll subscribe to this other local company. And once they do, we've realized they haven't churned away from us. And that's just simply because we provide the quality food, but also the service in delivering the same consistent food to their doorstep 52 weeks a year. Yeah,
I really like that because it kind of, there's this ebb and flow in stocking your grocery store or, your local produce selection. You kind of have to always be finding new vendors and sourcing that from a regional standpoint. And you're basically the same solution every day, every year.
So we think about it as we're a manufacturer on demand.
Yeah, that's
for food as well. And so every week we're harvesting a fourth of our farm year round.
Do you get any like weird pushback from people? Because it's like I'm trying to, I'm an interviewer, so I'm trying to punch holes through it, right? And I can't think of any negatives or punching holes through it. I'm not doing a very good job, but I'm thinking because it's so different, because it's indoors and because it's stacked, I'm sure there's pushback, right? Do you get concerns or kind of raised eyebrows about anything?
Absolutely. So to be growing without soil here in Iowa is one of the first talking points that usually come up of, well, how do you do that? How is that done? On one side of the coin, I believe it's just people aren't familiar with it.
Right.
And that less familiarity can lead to, anxiety or worry around it. But on the other side of the coin, something that I feel very strongly about is we have the chance to lead by example of the industry of indoor farming here in Iowa and the Midwest. And that's simply because, we have a top 10 ag school in our backyard at Iowa State University. Individuals are starting, especially younger individuals, are starting to see food supply chains and how to improve those. And a lot of them are ending up at the answer is indoor farming. So as they reach out looking for opportunities with us, we are in their backyard. And as far as direct-to-consumer indoor farms owning the supply chain, I believe I can guarantee we're the only one in Iowa. And we're likely among the only ones with this model and the true vertical integration where we've created the technology stack and we're direct-to-consumer in the world.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense that, Iowa, of course, leads in agriculture, and it makes a lot of sense that we lead in ag tech, right? That's a big movement too, ag tech. I think that's what they call it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, ag and food tech.
Yeah, ag tech. So it makes a lot of sense why that would be homegrown, pun absolutely intended. So I want to talk last few minutes about Minnesota. This model's actually been growing in Iowa. You said you're doing Ames, of course. You're doing the Des Moines Metro, starting to get into Des Moines Metro more frequently. You're heading out to the eastern state. I'm assuming eventually you want to just cover the entire state of Iowa.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I figured as much. But right now you're pushing into Edina, basically a suburb of Minneapolis, for those that don't know. And I'm going to go back to a conversation we had earlier about how, if we can talk about this, how you're marketing and how you're getting the word out to Edina. It's the same strategy you used in Iowa, which is just super old school. And I really, really love it. Can you kind of talk about how you're getting into Minnesota and how you're expanding up there?
Yes. So as we learned and learned from many trials and tribulations about what works and what doesn't work while building up the subscriber base for this farm, we tried various channels. And one of them are, of course, paid ads for Facebook and Instagram, which works well for us. We see very good conversion through that channel. But the other channel I think you're referring to, Justin, is offline, which I know in today's world that's crazy to hear, but offline marketing with door stickers. And the biggest reason is if you go out with door stickers and you have a face-to-face interaction, you can introduce yourself as, I have a farm just down the road. I deliver straight to your doorstep year round. You can subscribe, but you can cancel, pause anytime, etc. Customize your foods. If they can put a face to that name and they are curious, or their curiosity at least gets them to look at the door sticker, scan the QR code, or visit the site, that's that biggest hurdle to get someone to just hear about you and see what you're about. If a door sticker can get someone to the site, they realize that we truly are your neighborhood farm with the mission to grow what you want, then we hope they join us on our mission. And the door sticker conversions have been incredible for us. And we have had many iterations of them. Some language, some rhetoric works, some doesn't. So we've essentially taken that same approach and said, if we're going to serve Minneapolis-St. Paul market, and we look at 60 times more population than Ames, where do we want to start with door stickers? And where do we want to start with Facebook and Instagram ads? And how can we use them as a 1-2 punch? So as an example, if someone becomes a subscriber via a Facebook ad, their very first deliveries, we are door sticking their neighbors and vice versa.
Yeah, I mean, it's no different than the companies who come and do your roof or paint your house, and then they go to your neighbors and hey, we just redid Justin's house. You should do it too. And one other thing that we focused on too is we have bright green bags, and those are reusable bags. So we're always trying to reduce our waste, and especially around the packaging. So it's kind of a modern day milkman approach. So upon your next delivery, we pick up your reusable bag, your reusable ice pack from you. And as the neighbors walk by on the sidewalk and they look over and there's a bright green bag with our branding there, we've seen some conversions just come from neighbors via literally just a delivery. I love it so much. The more the hyper local approach. It's so funny because so many people are betting on big corporate AI robot faceless company, right? And from even these tech companies, even these really sophisticated tech companies with data, so many of them are adopting face-to-face models. They're realizing that there's just something missing when you scale up and when you go big. I always ask students, because people say oh, Amazon's just going to rule the world. They're going to do everything. And I'm what if something came along and, people tell me Amazon's immovable. They'll never be moved. And I'm okay, what if something comes along that's faster and cheaper than Amazon? Everyone's oh, I'd use that. Yeah, it's not as immovable as you think. They're not as disruption proof as you think. And it's always fascinating to me when local, when brick and mortar, when face-to-face beats the snot out of these high-tech models, right? Like technology, when, you know, and scalability doesn't have to be this multinational corporation. It can be companies like Nebulam that are doing direct-to-consumer, that are shaking hands at people's doors and doing door stickers. If people want to get produce and they're in your areas, or they want to check which areas you're coming to, how can they find you?
Yes, so I should mention our rebrand. So we realized that at the end of the day, I'm co-founder and chief farmer. Dana is co-founder and chief engineer. And by us wanting to be the farm ourselves going forward, we actually rebranded recently to Clayton Farms. So anyone can visit claytonfarms.com. You can see what we're growing, prices, serving sizes. And then if you want to sign up, you can choose Iowa or Minnesota. It redirects you to that storefront and sign up for your subscription, your delivery frequency, customize which foods you want in your subscription. And as early as the following week will be your first delivery.
Excellent. Clayton Mooney, co-founder and chief farmer of Clayton Farms. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Justin. Cheers.
And to my fellow Iowans, Iowa expats, and Iowans at heart, thanks for listening and subscribing to the Iowa Podcast.